1. Select the School tab on the dashboard. 2. Select your region. 3. Select your school type. Schools are listed in alphabetical order. Once you select your school, your shared school folder will be presented. Select Upload, navigate to your file, select Open, and the file will be uploaded. Congratulations! You have successfully uploaded your document.
Locks, braids, afros, wave cuts, bantu knots. Here is a frequently discussed, hotly debated, and deeply personal issue for men and women of all ages. That is why in 2020, the Ministry of Education encouraged students. As a predominantly Black country, the Ministry of Education understands that the acceptance of our racial and cultural uniqueness means stepping away from ingrained colonial perspectives about the appropriateness of Black hair in schools and professional settings. We want our students to express themselves with respect and to treat others with respect. So the Ministry of Education has undergone an evaluative process to look at the hair policy in the school system. This change in policy will allow students to wear their afros, locks, braids, and other protective hairstyles associated with their racial and cultural identity. One of the most important changes to note is that locks will be generally accepted for both boys and girls. There will no longer be a process of applying to the Department of Education to state that they're being worn for religious reasons. This policy in its entirety will be made available on the Ministry of Social Development and Education Facebook page and the Government of Angola Facebook page.
The Ministry of Education and Youth is pleased to announce the Fathers Read To campaign. It is my wish, it is my hope that fathers across Jamaica will take up the challenge to read to their young children for 30 minutes every day. You will build such a rapport with your children, it will be amazing. Fathers who read to or with their young children positively impact them in so many ways. It helps the children to read better. They will know more words and will be better able to communicate. We know that fathers read too, and we want to highlight you. Post your pics on social media of you reading with your children. Tell us what it means for you. Reading is the gift that will last forever.
The platform was initially developed to facilitate the electronic submission and monitoring of school board minutes to provide technical support to school boards. The platform, however, is being designed as part of a wider strategy to assist the boards to carry out their functions more efficiently. A pool of resources for school chairmen and members will also be provided on the platform. Here you will find the main tabs to navigate a selected school or public educational institution. A navigation menu is located at the top right corner where you will find additional information such as contact information and resources to support the process. The system is very secure and has advanced security features. Files are stored in a secured cloud storage environment, box.com, and linked to the main website that was created using Google Sites. We recognize that the minutes of meetings contain confidential information, and in this regard, mechanisms are in place to protect and maintain the integrity of the system and to ensure that strict confidentiality is always observed. Permission levels are active and school folders are shared only with persons who are authorized to do so. The system will be monitored on a regular basis to ensure relevance and uptake. On the resource page, you can find a variety of materials to assist you in carrying out your role as school members. Other information will be provided on a timely basis to assist the schools and institutions in navigating the platform and accessing vital resources. Upload process. A copy of the board meeting minutes can be uploaded in just a few clicks. To navigate your school's folder, please follow these simple steps. 1. Select the school tab on the dashboard. 2. Select your region. 3. Select your school type. Schools are listed in alphabetical order. Once you select your school, your shared school folder will be presented. Select Upload, navigate to your file, select Open, and the file will be uploaded. Congratulations! You have successfully uploaded your document.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're just informing you that we're just about ready to begin.
Hotly debated and deeply personal issue for men and women of all ages. That is why in 2020, the Ministry of Education encouraged students to celebrate their natural hair with World Afro Day.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very pleasant morning to you all. My name is Anita Bailey, Community Relations Education Officer in the Ministry of Education and Youth, and it is my pleasure to welcome you this morning to the Office of the Prime Minister Banquet Hall for the press conference regarding the Education Transformation Oversight Committee's quarterly report. This is our second press conference of this nature, and ladies and gentlemen, it is really a pleasure to be here to hear about all of the hard work that has been put into the process of transformation. However, before I begin, I'm going to ask us to stand for the playing of the national anthem. Thank you very much. You may be seated. Honorable Favour Williams, MP, Minister of Education and Youth, Mrs. Maureen Dwyer, Permanent Secretary Acting in the Ministry of Education and Youth, Dr. Kassan Troop, Chief Education Officer Acting, MOEY. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to extend apologies for Ms. Trudy Deans, Senior Advisor to the Prime Minister, who is unable to be here with us today, but we acknowledge her in her absence. Dr. Adrian Stokes, Chairman of the Education Transformation Oversight Committee, other members of the ETOC, members of the Executive Management Team of the MOEY, Dr. David McBean, Executive Director, Mona School of Business and Management, Dr. Paulette Griffiths, technical lead, Mona School of Business and Management, members of the media, online viewers, a very pleasant morning to you all. It is completely okay for you to tell me good morning. I promise I won't charge you. Today marks a milestone for the Education Transformation Oversight Committee and the Ministry of Education and Youth. And that milestone is marked by our commitment to accountability to the people of Jamaica. We are committed to ensuring that transformation takes place in our country, in our education system, in order to ensure that our human capital is fully developed and ready to face the 21st century. And so, as we promised in July, we are right back here to update the nation on our progress of implementing the recommendations from the Patterson report. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go straight into the day's activities, and we're going to invite Dr. Adrian Stokes, Chairman of the Education Transformation Oversight Committee, as he brings his report on progress updates. Please make him welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Morning, everyone. Where is my protocol list? Right. Honorable Favour Williams, Mrs. Maureen Dwyer, Permanent Secretary Acting, Dr. Kassan Troop, members of the Education Transformation Oversight Committee. I know some are joining online. Members of the executive management team of the Ministry of Education, Dr. David McBean, Dr. Griffiths from the Mona School of Business, members of the media, online viewers, everyone, welcome. It's really good to be here and to be speaking with you this morning. So what I'd like to do is to table our report from ETOC on the progress of the transformation effort that is underway. So the Education Transformation Oversight Committee, or ETOC for short, continues to be guided by monitoring and implementation of the recommendations from the Patterson report. As a committee, we recognize the vast responsibility we have assumed towards ensuring that the nation is kept abreast of the work that is currently being done by the Ministry of Education to implement the recommendations of the Patterson report. The appointment of ETOC by the Prime Minister to oversee the implementation of the Patterson report signifies that as a country, we are very, very serious about the transformation of our education system. As a country, we are not satisfied with the return on education. And that's why there is this deliberate effort to transform what currently obtains. Everyone recognizes there is no long-term solution to crime and our perennial low economic growth rates until we fundamentally improve our educational outcomes. And as I said at the first press conference, let's not relitigate the Patterson report or the recommendations. What we can agree on as a country is that we will be in a much better place if we execute the recommendations. In fact, and as I said then, even if we execute some of the recommendations, we will be well on our way to improving the human capital in our country. So for this period, we are reporting that progress has been made with the implementation. The Ministry of Education continues to implement some of the recommendations. The Minister and the Permanent Secretary Acting will speak on some of the accomplishments to date. I'm also pleased to report that a consultant, the Mona School of Business consulting arm, has been recruited to finalize the implementation plan. So as you recall, that's a key deliverable from ETOC, working with the ministry. It is to be noted that while the work on transformation is ongoing, there is need for an increase in the speed of execution. There are some key initiatives that are lagging. The completion or the build-out of a specialized unit within the ministry that will be focused on the transformation effort. So that's an initiative that needs greater urgency. The recruitment of the Chief Transformation Officer to drive the daily execution of key initiatives, the hiring of a project lead, and finalization of a communication plan and the execution of that communication plan. These are all material things that are lagging. We've been having ongoing dialogue with the minister and the permanent secretary, Mrs. Dwyer, around fundamentally changing the way things are done to ensure the ministry executes with a greater level of urgency. The transformation effort is so important to Jamaica's future, and we've said it before, that we really should be moving heaven and earth to ensure the recommendations are implemented in a timely manner and also a sustainable manner. I am happy to say that I have received a strong commitment from Minister Williams that the pace of execution within the ministry will be increased going forward. ETOC looks forward to the ministry ramping up activities so we can get on a far better trajectory in terms of implementation. Before I conclude, I would like to highlight the work that is being done by the Mona School of Business as they seek to conclude the implementation plan for the Patterson Report. Currently, the team from the Mona School is in the what I would call the consultation phase of their engagement. This means they will be meeting with different stakeholders from across the country to solicit feedback. Once that process is complete, the Mona School of Business will deliver an implementation plan that will essentially convert the recommendations from the Patterson Report into a project plan that is implementable. In other words, turning the recommendations into initiatives that are time-bound, measurable, and specific. These specific, measurable, and time-bound initiatives will give ETOC an objective basis to monitor the ministry's progress on implementation. I would also like to say that the ministry has not been waiting for the work of the Mona School to be completed, right? The ministry has actually started work on the recommendations, and ETOC wants to acknowledge that fact. I would like to, before I conclude, to utilize the opportunity to thank the Minister Williams, and the senior leadership team at the ministry for all their hard work to date. I would also like to recognize the work of Ms. Colleen Swaby and Ms. Anita Bailey for helping ETOC to move forward with our work. We recognize the significant contribution of the Secretariat and these two ladies in particular. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stokes. Some very important points raised there about the work of the ministry and the work of ETOC. We're very happy to know that the ministry continues to grasp at those things that can be implemented even while we await the work from the consultancy. And so thank you so very much for that report, sir, and for your vote of confidence as well. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be hearing now from our Honourable Minister of Education and Youth, Mrs. Favour Williams, as she provides us with strategic initiative updates from the Minister of Education and Youth.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Let me acknowledge as well Mrs. Maureen Dwyer, Permanent Secretary Acting, Dr. Kassan Troop, our Chief Education Officer Acting, Dr. Adrian Stokes, the Chairman of the Education Transformation Oversight Committee, and the members of that committee who are here or online, members of the Executive Management Team at the Ministry of Education and Youth. I also see Mr. Alok Jan in the audience from the Office of the Prime Minister. Let me acknowledge Dr. David McBean, Executive Director, Mona School of Business and Management, and also Dr. Paulette Griffiths, who is doing some of the heavy lifting in terms of helping us to do that plan. Members of the media, those who are online, good morning again. I'm going to be showing a few slides this morning, and I will begin where the chairman left off in recognizing that the Ministry of Education and Youth has not been waiting for persons to be in seats. Yes, there's work happening in the background in terms of recruiting and so on, and the Permanent Secretary will speak to that, but we have been working on the recommendations ahead of that. And so what I want to do this morning is to situate the report in terms of the 7 thematic areas, so that going forward, when we report, we will always report so that we link what we're doing to the recommendations, and all of Jamaica would be able to follow and understand what we are doing at the ministry. So on the first slide, so just to recap, the 7 thematic areas in the JETC report, Jamaica Education Transformation Commission report, are the following: governance, administration, leadership, and legislation, number 1. Number 2, early childhood education. Number 3, curriculum, teaching, and teacher training. Number 4, the tertiary sector. Number 5, TVET in Jamaica. 6, infrastructure and technology. And number 7, finance. So the ministry has been able to make gains in some of these areas, 5 out of 7 of these areas. Why 5 out of 7? If you recall, when the Prime Minister received the report from the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission, the Prime Minister made a further request for the Transformation Commission to do a deep dive into the TVET area. And so that we await that report there in terms of the recommendations. In the area of finance, you would understand that this is an area with which we have to collaborate with the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. So that's an area to come. But in the other 5 areas, we have made progress. And so I would start with state and evaluation of education in Jamaica. There is a requirement, there's a recommendation there. So the very first recommendation is that in future years, all secondary schools be evaluated and ranked using the value-added procedure, complementing the traditional evaluation of the National Education Inspectorate. And if you recall, the National Education Inspectorate started many years ago, and it has been diligently producing evaluation of our schools. And we are happy to report that the value-added metrics is being utilized with 150 schools, and those reports would have been produced in 2021-22, and in this year as well, 2022-23, as the NEI goes through its inspection cycle, those reports will become available. Just to remind Jamaicans, the NEI model is specifically linked to numeracy and literacy priorities of the Ministry of Education. Another recommendation is that there should be an education philosophy. And we have done that. So the recommendation is that we should widely promote an education philosophy which sees learning as a collaborative interaction between teachers, students, and the curriculum. The Ministry of Education has spent some time deliberating, drafting and redrafting, and at this point we do have a proposed education philosophy. And it reads as follows: education in Jamaica is designed to support the holistic development of each person, focused on their intellectual, social, moral, physical, emotional, and spiritual development. Through diverse and equitable educational opportunities and inclusive developmental pathways, a love for learning and humanity is engendered, resulting in citizens of moral and cultural excellence and the requisite competence for them to thrive in a changing world while contributing purposefully to the harmonious life of families and the development of communities, their country, and the world at large. To date, we have not had an education philosophy articulated as well as this one has. I know we have taglines in the education sector. One said, "Persons know and repeat often," which is every child can learn, every child should learn, but that's a tagline. This is a deeper philosophical embrace of education and what education can do for society. Of course, we know that we have to build the awareness around this as we go forward. All right, so moving now to the first of the broad thematic area, the governance, administration, leadership, and legislation. A top recommendation out of that is for us to quickly move to a regime of licensing of our teachers, given its direct link to professionalizing teaching and other benefits, including greater accountability structures. And the implementation is for us to complete legislative processes to enable the Jamaica Teaching Council to act as the sole entity to issue teachers' license. I'm happy to report that we have been working at this for some time now, because legislation takes time. We could not sit here and wait for the report. And so we are now in Parliament with the Jamaica Teaching Council bill. It's going through the rigors of a joint select committee, being examined clause by clause as we look at the recommendations that have come in from many stakeholders to see how we could incorporate the ones with which we agree into that bill. It is a time-consuming process. This was started, the Joint Select Committee was started in February of this year. We are in December. And I think we're only about 75% of the way there, because it's just, you have to go word by word, sentence by sentence, clause by clause, and there's a lot of debate, a lot of back and forth in. So you can see, but we have our sights set on the first quarter of next year. We move now to another recommendation, still keeping under that broad theme, for the education sector to have an education management information system. The report says that this is critically needed because while we have a lot of data at the ministry, every time we need it, it's just great effort to pull it together. There's no system that you could go to and quickly collate the data. We have started this, the implementation process for the education management system. So a firm has been engaged to manage that process. An oversight committee was established last month. There's data gathering sessions that are being conducted. And I know because this system, the EMIS we call it, already exists and is in use all across the world, that we will be able to take it on and tailor it to our needs. So we have started that process. And the terms of reference, so we'll go on to the next one, still remaining under that first broad thematic area. The recommendation there is a strategic review of the Ministry of Education structure to identify inefficiencies and create a structure. So we are reporting the terms of reference for the consultant has been developed. Some funding has been obtained from the International Development Bank, and we're continuing the organizational review led by our OD unit, or organizational department unit. So I want to say to the press, as I am going through this, there are well over 190 recommendations. When we look through those, about 72 of them are priority recommendations. And I'm sure when we get the report from the Mona School of Business, they may have a little bit different alignment, but together we will work on it. So if you think this is being too detailed, it's almost a 400-page report with many, many recommendations. And so in wanting Jamaicans to stay with us, to understand where we are, you've got to embrace the details with which we're going through this. It's a meticulous process, and we want Jamaicans to understand the quantum of work that's required to date and that's going to be required going forward. So the other recommendation is to reform the funding model for primary schools and secondary schools in order to enhance equity. And let me contrast that with what we have today. Currently, the way our schools are funded, it is on a per capita basis, meaning a per student basis. So each school, regardless of where you are on the spectrum, if you are a school that's way outperforming, you're going to get the same per capita amount as a school that's underperforming. That has been the formula for many, many decades. The report is saying that we should look at reforming that. And so we've started to look at the work. We're not yet at a point where we can come out with any new formula just yet, but it is serious work is going on in terms of looking at how what formulas exist across the world, how could we do it differently in Jamaica to enhance equity, because the cry today is that there are schools that are in greater need that should be getting more, but we're not able to do that because of the formula that we have currently, which is, it's a formula with which there's great transparency, so schools know exactly what they're getting, and nobody can look over and say, you're getting more, I'm getting less, right? Because that's how it is. But is that the formula that's going to serve us going forward? Or we move on now to another recommendation. which is accountability legislation, teacher performance legislation, health and safety. And again, we are happy to report that we've done serious work in terms of the review of the Education Act and regulation. That's in progress. We meet regularly with the lawyer who is helping us to do that work there. Our Education Act dates back to 1962, just about 2 years out of, well, 1962, right? 1965, 3 years out of independence. And our regulations, education regulation, date back to 1980. So you can see we're in 2022. So maybe it deserves a relook, and that's the work that's happening right now. Additionally, the recommendation speaks to a review of the Child Care and Protection Act, especially a repeal of Section 24. Both of those are in progress. And again, I have to say, not excusing anything, but legislation is just a time-consuming process, given the number of entities that have to be involved. And if you send changes to one entity, they look at it and they have, something to say about it, you got to incorporate and send it to the other entity. But the important thing is that we're staying on the process, and in time we will be here with the Education Act and regulation in Parliament. Additionally, there's a need for higher education policy that has gone through several drafts, and we are at almost the final stage of that higher education policy. Next. Switching now to the early childhood sector. That has been in the focus in the recent days, but there's a call to rationalize the provision of center-based early childhood developmental services. We have put some of the statistics there as to where we are in terms of the schools that are benefiting from upgrading and construction of infant schools and departments. We've costed these out. We know how much it's going to be over what period of time. And as our annual budgets come into fold, you will see greater presence of the government in the early childhood sector. Moving on to the next recommendation would be to increase the quality of teaching and learning through provision of trained teachers and resources in the early childhood institutions. 300 early childhood teachers to benefit this year from training and upgrading, and we will continue to do that on an annual basis. The second thematic area is the curriculum teaching and teacher training. The recommendation there is to strengthen the structure for curriculum governance and implementation monitoring. We have been improving that. They're quarterly reporting on monitoring progress made. Already we have 2 reports. We know the number of schools that are underperforming, 248 of them, and they have been specifically targeted under the school improvement framework. And I want to say to Jamaicans, we have no shortage of data in the ministry. We know down to the level of the child who is underperforming, who is outperforming. What we have not been good at over the years is that hand-holding for that child that really needs it. Because as you can imagine, in a class, there may be 25, 30 children with one teacher. And so it's for us as an education ministry to just earnestly begin as I call it, the hand-holding. It's the individualized learning for those children who are really, really in need of it that we need to have happen in a much bigger way than we're doing it now, because that's the only way those children are going to catch up. All right, so let's move on. Ensure teachers and schools are adequately resourced to deliver online teaching. As you know, coming out of the pandemic, the government and private sector put a lot of resources into ensuring that We had our children have devices, and we are currently working to ensure that all of our schools have connectivity. So just to tell you what has been done in terms of the recommendation to implement schemes for teachers to access laptops and accessories. Over 8,500 teachers received laptops in the 21-22 academic year, which just ended. 15,000 laptops were provided to students on PATH. 8,000 teachers to receive laptops in this academic year, and we've already begun to distribute the e-vouchers for that. 25,000 tablets are to be provided to students on PATH, other students on PATH. We are to implement in our schools 720 desktop computers for 25 of our secondary schools. Those are being provided by Overseas Examination Council. And 10,000 laptops are being procured by e-learning to build out the ICT labs in high school as we prepared for the CXC e-testing exams. So in the area of technology, I think we are way, way ahead, way down the wicket by any measure that you look at. Whether it's the student or the school, we are putting in the infrastructure so that the education system is not left behind. As I mentioned earlier, the tertiary sector is another thematic area. The Higher Education Act and policy are being worked on right now, and we actually have a draft bill that's making its way through the process. And into the new year, our hope is that we'll be able to take that through the entirety of the process. I'll just touch on infrastructure and technology, even though it came in another thematic area. But the recommendation there is to increase government expenditure on school maintenance from 1% to 3% of the annual budget. We are not there yet, but we have moved significantly this year relative to the last school year. And so a total of almost $800 million is what we're working with in this school year for critical repairs and maintenance of our schools. And you could see that the initial $440 million benefited 140 schools across the 7 regions. We have an additional $127 million that just was approved in Parliament recently in the supplementary. And then across the region, $210 million was allocated for school repairs to benefit 106 schools. And much of that work is already underway. And we are very conscious of the needs across our schools in terms of infrastructure and the need to expand that budget. I'm almost at the end. Still under the thematic area of infrastructure and technology. We're looking forward in the first quarter of next year to the beginning implementation of solar energy use in 30 of our schools as a pilot. And then depending on the results of that, that would be something we would look to scale across our schools. Our schools are perfect. They are open during the days to be able to use that. We'd love to be able to have better cooling in our classrooms. They're very hot right now. You know, if you go into them, most of them don't even have fans. So to the extent that we can use more solar energy at our schools, you can see how our children will be in a more comfortable environment, which will enhance their teaching and learning. And then just finally, in that same thematic area, the recommendation is that the ministry should continue to deploy broadband infrastructure to increase penetration across the island. And we have been doing just that. 554 schools have been contracted for broadband connectivity. of which 377 schools already have access to adequate broadband connectivity, and this is being put in by the government. And when we talk about adequate broadband connectivity, we really mean that. There was an assessment done of all the schools, looked at what their population was, and a decision was made that for each student, here is how much broadband connectivity we should allocate to these schools. And so if you go to these 377 schools, it should be quite evident to you that there's good connectivity in these schools. And we continue to procure for the other locations. All right, and then finally, the recommendation is for investment in new software platforms to enhance governance, accountability, and improve productivity to the school level. We've started with the central ministry in terms of getting on to the government's MyHR system, which is allowing us to bring staff and teacher data onto this central system so that we have our hands around the data. A teacher's data is not in all different places, at the school, at the region, and so on. We have it in one location. It's a massive project. We've begun, we've put in many hours, many weeks, months already, but we know that there's still a lot more to be done in order for us to get to that place where we can easily have access to data. And so I am going to stop here, hand it over to the PS to talk about just the human capital that's needed to help us to accelerate the progress of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister and Chairman. My job is to briefly bring you up to speed on how we are going to arrange the drivetrain for the change. So, Minister Williams, Chairman and members of ETOC, MOE executives, and members of the media, as well as those in here and online. Where is online? Up there? Good morning. So you will recall from the last period of transformation, one of the complaints was that the ministry was too big and bloated and that we were not able to meet the needs of our customers quickly enough and in a direct way. And that resulted in the formation of some special purpose entities. The NEI is one of them, JTC and the JTEC and so on and so on. But despite that, the problem remains. And so I recall the Prime Minister saying very clearly that this Ministry of Education will have to implement the changes and make the moves necessary to make sure that we are implementing the recommendations of the Pattison report. And so it is with that in mind that we set to work. I'm reporting on a work in progress. Well, initially, we need to make sure that we are able to support ETOC to be able to report on our progress. And so part of the interim work that has been done, I'm pleased to report to you today that we are way down the road, down the wicket, in the recruitment of a Chief Education Transformation Officer. We've gone through the process. It took a little while. We had applicants from not just Jamaica, but overseas. We were able to conduct those interviews, and we have identified a leading candidate, and the background work still continues. We expect that before the end of this month, we should be able to name that person to the public. But you well understand we will have to do the background checks because this is a really important aspect of Jamaica's work. Concurrent with that, we are in the process of the recruitment of a project lead. Am I doing something wrong? Did someone say PS? Okay. The project lead should be in place by December 16th. We actually did have a date that we had proposed for the 25th to do our interviews, but due to the unavailability of some of the candidates, we had to push it back. But we're proposing a date of the 16th when we should have that project lead in place. In addition to that, we have identified an administrative person to be on our interim team, a communication strategist to be on the team, and so there should be full support by January of 2023 for the work that is to come. Now, in the background, I will just give you a taste by way of these documents that we have worked out along with the Transformation Implementation Unit of the Ministry of Finance. One, a draft proposed functional profile of what the entire infrastructure for the transformation of the ministry will be. And this is to come under scrutiny and discussion and refinement to be fully implemented in line with our receipt of the implementation plan from the Mona School of Business. So know us to be working on this in the background, and we're being ably supported by the Ministry of Finance in this regard. Also, this is what the organizational structure should look like, available for discussion later, but it's in a draft state. But I just want you to understand, we're working on these things because we have to change the architecture of the ministry in order to get us to where we want to go. This is something that has been recognized over time. Over the last transformation period and into this one, we realize that this is an issue that must be dealt with. So, in addition to that, I know it was mentioned before, but Dr. Griffiths, you're here, Dr. McBean, the Mona School of Business, they've been invaluable partners in helping to engage with the recommendations. There are workshops planned for stakeholders coming up next week. And out of that, we're expecting that our plan will be delivered by the end of February 2023. That's our implementation plan, the monitoring and evaluation plan, as well as a financing plan for the transformation, because of course it has to be funded. And so those are my brief updates as it relates to where we are with reorganizing the architecture of the ministry to push the transformation project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our Honourable Minister of Education and Mrs. Favourable Williams and our Permanent Secretary Acting, Mrs. Maureen Dwyer. Ladies and gentlemen, obviously a lot of work going on in the background there at the Ministry of Education and Youth, all supported by ETOC or overseen by ETOC and the team there. Some key takeaways for you. You would have heard that we're investing significantly in the overall infrastructural development and upgrading of our schools. We're investing significantly in professional development of our teachers at all levels of the system. The development of an education philosophy, certainly a landmark activity for our country, which will definitely guide everything that comes from there on out once it is approved. The review of the Education Act, demonstrating that we have a ministry that is committed to working at being agile. We're not quite agile as we would like to be, but we're certainly getting there. Certainly, ladies and gentlemen, big ticket item for the minister here, the piloting of the solar energy in 30 schools. I can just imagine how much it will save us on our light bill when it goes into all of our schools. So a lot of things happening in the ministry in the background. We really are driving that train and cleaning up the tracks as we go along. So thank you very much, ladies. We're at that section, ladies and gentlemen, where we are going to be opening the floor for questions. I do know that we have persons joining us online on JIS, on YouTube, and on our Facebook pages for both the JIS and the Ministry of Education and Youth, so you can join us there. You can also share your questions there if you have any questions for us on that platform. I am going to start with those persons that are in the room now, and Mrs. Cheryl Bromfield from our communications team will be availing you with the microphone. So I'm opening the floor for questions now. Your journalists that are in the room, you can just stand, identify yourselves, and direct your question.
Morning, I'm Jamila Maitland. I'm a reporter from TVJ. My question is to the chairman and the Minister of Education, if you can. You know, the chairman mentioned that some of the staff, you know, the implementation was lagging. I think last time we were here, we saw an October timeline for the chief transformation officer, if I'm correct, and some of the other persons. You know, what would have been causing some of the delays? I heard the PS mention about the availability of some of the persons, but is there any other thing that would have caused the delay of ensuring that some of these persons, you know, are on the job already?
All right. PS, would you like to?
Thank you for your question, and it is indeed an important question if we hope to be an accountable people. So there really were generalized issues relating to recruitment. The truth is, once you're doing local and overseas, you have to work out how to synchronize times and availability and so on and so on. And so many of the issues were administrative in nature. Nothing that I, as a seasoned person in the public sector, would say that is highly unusual. So, you know, people fall out. They will apply for a job, for example, and then suddenly you get something to say, oh, I'm no longer available. Or they may query something about the salary or condition of work, and suddenly they're not available. So those are some of the things that we were trying to grapple with as so we missed our deadline, but we're on track. So, is that helpful?
Morning, Hal Shane Burke, with the Jamaica News. Well, I don't know if whosoever will answer this question. I know that the funding for schools has been an issue. There have been a number of schools who have said that there needs to be a re-examination of funding. The minister spoke to a new formula that will be looked at and examined. Can we get a timeline as to when this will be? What will the school be expecting? And will this also incorporate PATH programs and also other monies that would be distributed to schools?
All right, so that's a question for Minister. All right, Minister.
So as you can imagine, such a question about a change in a formula is going to like perk up everybody's ears, right? As to what that formula will be and so on. Today, we don't have the details of that, other than to say we recognize this as a recommendation. I know that given our current formula, we've been tweaking that, but that we really need to examine and have some broad consultation around it, because as you can imagine, if a school used to get X and it is determined that they get X less because some other school that's very, very in need gets it, you can imagine how that's going to be. So this is one that we have to be certain of. I know that right now, even now, in looking at the existing formula that we have, we're doing things like having the central ministry pay for electricity for our schools, all right, so that our schools are able to get more from the grants that they give. Right now, schools pay for their electricity. We would have in the last school year, beginning in the last school year, begin to pay for internet service for schools so that it allows them to have more of their grants. And that's why we have this elaborate program that's underway in terms of its implementation for internet. So we recognize that this one is going to be one that requires not just the Ministry of Education and Youth in terms of us making a decision, but if there's one recommendation that's going to need broad consensus, it is going to be this one, if we make a change in the formula. Right? Sorry, I can't be more specific than that right now.
Jamila again from TDJ. Minister, just a quick follow-up, how much funding are we looking at, for this reform? If it, if the ministry is in their consultation phase, what kind of funding are we seeing? Because I know, the reform of something like that will be looking at a huge budget. So if you are able to say, please. And also, the NEI is currently doing, you said the NEI should prepare a report as it relates to the ranking of certain schools in a similar way how the Patterson report had done it. Are some of the schools aware of what they're grading them on? And, how is the ministry ensuring that they improve their standing to ensure that they're not only grading them academically, but they're, more wholesome and a more rounded student when they exit secondary schools?
All right. So I'll start and then I'll ask the PS in terms of the budget. So, as you heard the PS say, NEI came out of one of the prior deep dive studies into the education sector. And NEI has been faithfully producing reports about our schools. And they have been discussing those reports in the public domain, but I have to say that the reports have not been faithfully used across the school system. So if you take up any of the NEI report, the NEI report will tell you how effective is the school being led and managed. How effective does the teaching support the students' learning? It will tell you how well students perform in national and regional tests, how much progress do students make in relation to their starting point, which is the value added. It will tell you just a lot of things about the school, and at the end of the report, it gives a ranking of the school to say at the highest level, level 5, the school is doing exceptionally well, exceptionally high. Level 4, good. Level 3, satisfactory. Level 2, unsatisfactory. Level 1, needs immediate support. I believe that if we were religiously adhering, looking at these reports, and doing the things that need to be done, we would not be where we are today, having to do another deep dive into the sector. And so what I have been doing, along with the team at the ministry, is whenever we speak with our boards, we bring to their awareness the need for them to be very familiar with the NEI inspection report. Because our boards in our school, they are the governance, they provide the governance for the school. So a board should begin with the NEI report and can know that the school over which they are providing this governance is ranked in one of these 5 categories. So let's say the school is ranked unsatisfactory. It tells you, this report tells you, what are the areas of weakness. And so that board should be able to say to the principal, what is the school improvement plan? The principal will use this report along with the staff, along with the teachers, to come up with a school improvement plan. And on a monthly basis, when that board meets, they should be looking at that school improvement plan to see if those areas of weakness, if they're seeing improvement in those areas of weakness. And that is what we have to get all of our boards, all 1,000 of our boards, to really embrace and begin to do. Otherwise, we're not going to see the improvements that we want to see in our schools. So that's in terms of what are we doing. That is what we have to do. It doesn't sound, whiz bang. It doesn't sound, yeah, but it's just the kind of practical, on the ground issue, holding people to account, holding the principals to account in the school. They are the school leaders. Every single school across Jamaica should have a school improvement plan, even if you're in the excellent category, because you can go higher. And those plans on a monthly basis should be coming in front of the board so that they know what is being executed on the ground and whether or not they're tracking for improvement at the school. It's not been done faithfully across the sector, and that's what we want our boards to understand.
Okay, so the question about financing was probably answered already, because I did say to you that the Mona School would give us a tag along with the implementation plan, but I can say to you now, even in the interim, because we are implementing, our budget is dedicated to all the transformation activities, because it's a reorientation of what we do and how we do. So until we get that price tag, even as we go through our budgeting period now, all the activities that we're undertaking, Minister did say earlier that we, in terms of the provision of technology to our teachers and so on, all of those are contained in the ministry's budget, because we are the implementers. Is that helpful? Okay.
Thank you very much, PS. Thank you very much, Minister Williams, and thank you very much, Ms. Maitland. Any other questions from the floor for the members of the team, ladies and gentlemen? All right, no other questions from the floor? All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for your time this afternoon. Yes, and our online viewers, we need to integrate them. I don't know if we have any questions from online. We're not seeing them popping up right there for us, so our online viewers seem to be satisfied with what it is that we have presented today. And ladies and gentlemen, we will continue to update you. The Ministry of Education is, as we keep reiterating, very committed to involving our stakeholders in the conversation around transformation. We recognize that if the activity is to be successful, it is important for us to have our stakeholder buy-in. And so it's very important for us to have these quarterly press briefings. So you will be hearing from us in another couple of months with further updates. We have set the stage for you. You know what the recommendations are, and the recommendations, the abridged version of the report and the full version of the report can be found on the Ministry of Education's website, as well as the website of the Office of the Prime Minister. And so we look forward to you delving into the report and being prepared when we come to you in your communities, on your TV screens, talking to you, for you to talk back to us so we can listen, so we can all be a part of this transformation. Thank you so very much. Have a good day. And yes, I really do have to do that. Please forgive me. I have to say a very big thank you to the team from the Office of the Prime Minister for facilitating us today and for supporting the process from start to finish. They're with us consistently all the way through. And thank you also to our team from the Ministry of Education, our communications team, and all of the members of the media who are here to support us today, and our viewers online. Thank you all so very much. And now you're really going to have yourselves a good day.
Check, check. 1 2 1 2 6 4 3 2.